All right, so for today, what we're going to get into is CSS Basics, and that's going to make your ugly code pretty, okay? Because let's be honest, right now at this point, this is a whole lot of ugly, and we want to start making websites that look legit, right? Okay, so that's what we're going to get into. Let's start things off by going out to CSS Send Garden, and this is a website that demonstrates what we call CSS. Okay, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Been around for, I don't know, maybe late 90s, I think, is when we first saw it come down the pipeline. Did really start to take hold, I think, very early, maybe 99, early 2000 or so. We started seeing a lot of it. People doing it as normal, or as, yeah. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull up, I'm going to go break their code really quick. And I'm going to take off, I'm going to disable the CSS on this page here. I'll just do that by coming in here and taking that out. Okay, so this page right here is the same page as that page right there. Okay, the HTML is exactly the same, and the way we can tell that is just by pulling up the source code, and you can see the source code here. You know, a body, and we know some divs, and you know we have some H1s in there and H2s, and as such, I mean it's just going to look like that, right? Do you guys get it? And inside of the source code, we are going to link up this file called our CSS file, and you can see that this is the section that does that, and when we apply that CSS file, we get all this extra style applied to it. Our H1s look a little bit different. We have some borders and some margins and some graphics and some different things on our page at this point. Does that make sense? So the beauty of CSS is you can take an HTML file and style it however you want. For example, if I come in here and I click on this item right here, this is the exact same HTML file with a different CSS file now applied to it. These are the same HTML file, the only difference is a different CSS file applied to it, okay? And I can go down through and grab different CSS ones, and you can see totally different look and feel. The only difference is the CSS applied is different, but the content's the same. You guys see that road to enlightenment garbage that they keep putting up there? There's that road to enlightenment, and again, completely different look and feel depending on the CSS applied. And without it, you can see that's what it would look like. So for the vast majority of this class, moving forward, that's what we're doing. Okay, we're going to teach you guys how to style a website to look from this into something like that or that and make it look good. And all the various elements we're going to use, and sizing, and placement, and layout, and color, and that is all controlled within your cascading style sheets. All right, do you guys have any questions on that? All right, well, let's just get into it. We've got Llama World here. And first things first is let's sync up our external style sheet and get that connected with everything else. So the way we do that is we use a link tag, okay? And a link tag, it does not have a closing tag, so we can do a space slash to be compliant with older XHTML and HTML 4.0. And we're going to add some attributes in here. The first one is we want to reference out what kind of relationship this linked file is going to have with it. And this one is a style sheet. Remember, we have these cascading style sheets. And so we're going to link a file in this relationship is going to be a style sheet. And we want to reference out So we're going to do a hyperlink reference to where the style sheet is, and for the name of the file, it can be whatever you want. Okay, it might be style.css, it might be stylesheet.css, it might be color.css, whatever you want to call it, because we're going to create that file in a second here. So I'm going to say style. I don't know. We could do stylesheet.css. Last element we want to put in here is the type of file it is, and this is more for a backwards compatibility issue. In HTML5, you don't have to put in a type equals text/CSS, but for XHTML you did, and it's a good habit to get into to let it know what kind or what type of style sheet it is. And last, we're going to do one other one. The book doesn't talk about this yet, but we are going to apply it to all screens. Okay, we're going to talk about the various types of media that we can apply various types of CSS to later on. For right now, don't worry so much about that media other than you can place that in there. Type is a good thing to do. The two required elements are these two right here. But that line right there is what's going to link this external style sheet into our file. Okay, so from here we want to create a new file, so we're going to go to New, and I'm going to do a Save As, and I'm going to put it inside of the same directory, and I'm going to call it again stylesheet.css. All right, and if I type something in here, hello world or whatever, and I go into my directory and I look up stylesheet.css, you can see that hello world is there right now. Okay, so we know that inside of that directory, and obviously you're going to have to put it in a folder, like a chapter 4 folder on your desktop, and you're going to have to make sure that both of those files are in the same directory. If they're not in the same directory, it's not going to work. If I take stylesheet.css and put it out here, and I try to reference it now, I can't, well, there it is. I can't reference it. All right. So if your style sheets are not working, you either have some misspelled words. You might have like a capital S style sheet. You might just have like a style.css, and one is referencing style sheet. You need to make sure that the two of them are synced up with the same name. All right, exactly the same. Capitalization matters, spacing matters, stuff like that. So I'm going to do a style.css here because that's what we have in this directory, style.css. All right, any questions up to this point? All right, so those two need to be in the same directory. They need to be spelled exactly as you see them. And if you ever get a weird forbidden, it's probably because you haven't spelled something correctly, or if it's not applying, you've got something misspelled. It could also be a permission issue. If you guys are adding new files, if you guys remember on assignment 1, there was that permission script you could run to reset all of your permissions. That's another little trick you guys can use to factor out any problems that you might be having. So let's continue on. We have that style sheet there. I'm going to go ahead and refresh my tree structure here. I'm going to open up my style.css, and I'm going to move that into this other column here so we can see both at the same time. Okay, so I have a style.css on this side, and I have my index.html on this side. And we're going to talk about the various ways to style things, and there are various ways to do CSS. But this way is the best practice. This is the best way to do it, and this is the way you should be doing it in this class. But after I teach you a bunch of CSS, I'm going to show you the various types of CSS we can do. This is what we call external CSS because we have an external file. To do CSS, first off, what we do is we add what's called a selector. And it might be an H1 tag we're going to select. It might be a body tag that we're going to select. It might be a paragraph tag we're going to select. But you tell it what tag you want to select, okay? Does that make sense? So in this case, maybe we go through and we want to select an H1. So we're going to say an H1, and then we put some curly braces like so, right? And in between these two curly braces, we are going to now add our declaration. And our declaration is made up of two parts. We have our declaration property and our declaration value, and then you end with the semicolon afterwards, okay? And that is the syntax of some basic CSS. And if I come back to our page now and I refresh that, you can see I've made Llama World now red, okay? Because Llama World is made with an H1, and inside of my CSS I used a selector. I said H1 in some curly braces, color, colon, red, semicolon, like so. And you can do other things, okay? So we can do a background dash color, and we want to make that blue. And I'm going to come back here, and you can see that that background color is now made blue. Now that's really ugly, but it works, all right? You guys have any questions on this? Is that clear? Who's feeling a little lost still? Throw up a hand if you guys are still feeling a little lost. I can rehash this out. All right, so that's a basic declaration on how that works. There are different ways to add color, okay? So color is going to change the color of the text. Background color is going to change the background color of the element. And if you remember, did we talk about block and inline elements at all? I don't know if we did. Okay, we might talk about those later on. But first off, I just used the word red. And that is one way to display color through a word. And if I just do something like this, you can see, you know, all the various colors that they have for us that we can use. We can look up CSS color names, and there's a lot. You can see all these colors on the screen here. And let's be honest, light golden rod yellow, I mean, are you guys going to really remember that color? Probably not. And so I don't like to use color names, you know, unless I'm doing something quick and I just want a red, and I don't care what red I'm getting. And let's be honest with you, that is like the ugliest red and the ugliest blue that you can get. But you can quickly just grab these, you know. So I'll do that if I'm just doing something fast, like I did just now. Otherwise, I'm going to use what's called a hex code, and a hex code might look something like this. So I'm going to do that, and you can see that the color that just came up was that exact same red that we used before. And the way that that works is hexadecimal is a number that goes from 1 to what?
256.
Not 256.
It's close though.
Nope.
Oh, no, don't listen
It's not
to that.
1,000.
Don't listen to that.
Anybody know? So if we look at binary, that's a number from 0. And I actually should put 0 on here because that is a 0. 0 to 1, right? And if we're counting, we say 0, and then we say 0, 1, and then 1, 1, and then and so forth. You guys know binary, right? Okay, so we count. And it's a 2-based. Like picture if you had, instead of 10 fingers on your hands, you had 2 fingers, and all you could do is just like, I have 0, I have 1, I have, and then if I wanted to start again, I would say like, another hand, I'd be like, right, 1, 0, and then 1, 1, and then if I had a third hand, it would kind of roll over. Make sense? When we're counting with 10, we count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, essentially that, you know, next digit, decimal would go, you know, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we loop over into 2 digits, and then we start, you know, we do a 1 and then a 1 and then a 1, 2, and so forth, okay? In hexadecimal, you go, it's basically what we call a base 16 number system. And that's going to go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, oops, got my 1 there, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F. And if you count those up, you have 16 digits, okay? And if we loop around, then we would have an F 0, an F1, kind of like 11, 12. Does that make sense to you guys now? And as we, actually, sorry, I got that wrong. It's not an F, it's a 1. Okay, so we'd go to F, and then the next one would be a 1, and then we could count all the way up to like FF, and that would equal out your super crazy high number. Okay, so that's what that means. It's a value from 0 to F, and you can count up and go really high. And when we look at hexadecimal numbers, has anybody ever heard of RGB? What does that stand for? Red, green, and blue. And when we look at hexadecimal, we start off with a hashtag, and we do an XX. I'm just going to put a space here, XX, and an XX. And each one of those stands for a red, a green, and a blue. And so if I want to give a lot of red, like I did up above here, I want to max out the amount of red that I have by saying my red is going to be all the way to the top. And then I'm going to say I want no green, and I want no blue. And that's how I got the color red up above here. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. And if I want to mix and match those, or if I want to say FF, 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 that's going to add all the colors together and equal white. And that's how you get white. And if you want black, you're going to say straight zeros. Okay, and so that's what we call hexadecimal. And when we're out generating colors, we go out to color.adobe.com, for example. And let's say we, really like, I don't know, that yellow there. You can see we've got a hex code down here below. And if I take that hex code and I place that in there, you can see how that yellow's come up. We have had maxed out red. We have a pretty high amount of green and about middle blue. And that's what is giving us that color yellow right there. And again, if we go back to our page, we can see that yellow being applied to Llama World. Okay, any questions on that? There's another way to do color, and this is what we call RGB, okay, red, green, and blue. And that is broken out with 3 digits, like so. And each digit stands for red, green, and blue. And each, and that one is a number from 0 to 255, or 256 different values. And that's where you get the 256 from. Because when we count up those numbers, we can count up to 256. So if we want to go a lot of red, we'll do 255, no black, and no green, no blue. And we get that same red. So that's how the RGB works. Now, you could go through and just give a value, but from what I see online, the standard is we give a hexadecimal value. All right. So let's go ahead and find some good colors. We can go over my color wheel here, and I'm going to go explore, and I'm going to grab, I don't know, maybe Moneymaker here. Let's see what that looks like. We could do that as our text color, and then we could do that as our H1 color, and we could do that as our link color, and that is our background color there. Where is the edit copy? Okay, so we have the colors all right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here and I'm going to do a new selector. And I'm going to say all of my body text, all of my text by default is going to be made that dark blue. It probably looks black for you guys, but it's a dark blue. All right. And then my background color is going to be that white. It's a very light gray, and I'm going to paste that in there as such. Okay, and then for my header elements, I'm going to select this color here, and I want that for my header elements, and I'm going to turn off this background color on the H1s for now. We could do something later if we wanted to. And for our link colors, I'm going to say I'm going to do an anchor link. And I'm going to make them have a color, and we'll go grab that green there. Like so. And if we go back to our page now and refresh it, you can see that that background colors changes slightly. That green is now my links, and I have that blue for Llama World. Okay? And I could probably even put that same, I don't know, let me see what it looks like. Let's do color as a background color, and I just want to see if it looks okay. It might be way too dark. It's working, kind of. All right. So you can kind of see how hexadecimal we could grab those, and we could also grab the RGB colors down in here as well. There are other ways to give color. Another way is through what we call RGBA. And let's say I do an RGB, but the A is for an alpha channel or an opacity channel. And I'm going to say it's going to be black. And I'm going to do a 0.5. Oops, I need to say background color here. My background color is going to be black with those 3 digits. And then the 4th digit is a digit between 0 and 1. And at a 0.5, think of it like a 50%. Okay, and you can see when I hover over it, see that little checkerboard there that's slowly coming through? If I pull that up to a full 1, it's going to be pure black. If I put that down to like a 0.1, it's going to be almost completely transparent. So if I do a 0.5, you should see on Llama World here a kind of gray, because it's letting that white from the background shine through or show through. Okay? Yeah, so it's an opacity. But I don't want that right now, so we're going to get rid of that. All right. So before I move on to more CSS, let's get into the various types of CSS that are out there. So first off, we have external. There's 4 types, and the first one and the most important is external CSS. And I'm just going to do some comments in here. I'm going to list out if you ever want to comment out some code, you can do it like that inside of your HTML. And anything written in this area will not be processed, okay? So we have external right here. And then the next one is what we call embedded. And then the next one after that is your inline. And, you know, I had to actually tab these over. There are some other ones. First off, there are your browser defaults. And after that, we have one called imported. Okay, and these are the various types of CSS that exist out here. And the best way is to use external for now. And that's the way we're going to use in this class. But I want you guys to understand what the other ones do and what they look like. So when I say browser defaults, if you remember, by default, my anchor links are what color? What color were your anchor links? They're blue. And if I do not put in an anchor link and say make it this, you know, green stuff or whatever we've got here, then it's going to go back to blue. So you can see the first thing that it looks at is going to be your browser default. So if you do not change that, it's going to roll back to that. Okay? Does that make sense? So your external style sheets are going to override your browser defaults. And there's all kinds of stuff. If you remember your H1s, you have a little bit of margin above and below. I can go over here and I can say margin is now 0. And I can refresh Llama World and you can see that that's now been taken away. There's a little edge around here on body that gives a margin, and I can say margin 0. And if I don't specify to override the browser defaults, it's not going to. All right, so blue links are going to show up unless you tell them that your links are another color. And you know, you're going to get some margins and some weird stuff if you don't tell them that you want to zero those out. Now, there's another kind of CSS called embedded, and this will override your external CSS, kind of like this overrode your browser defaults. This kind of CSS, the way you put this in is you put out some style tags inside of your head tags. They must be in your head tags. And you can override stuff in here. So we can say our anchor link is going to be given the color pink. Again, I'm just using quick colors here. I'm going to go back and refresh that, and you can see that these anchor links are now pink instead of green. So again, you can see how embedded is overriding external, and external overrode the browser defaults. Then one step farther than this is I can come down to that anchor link, okay, and I can say style equals color green, something like that. And this is what we call inline CSS. And if I go back here and I refresh it, you can see that that specific home, which I applied it to right here, is now green. So again, it's going to look at your browser. Then if you have external, it's going to look at that. If it's going to have embedded, it's going to override that. And then the last one it will display is your inline. Now, can anybody tell me why external is the best? Any ideas at all? Or smart Jared when you need them? Ken?
Is it because it's in a separate file and be able easily to find everything instead of having it all cluttered?
So yeah, you're not going to have it all cluttered, because if you put it all inside, can you imagine every anchor link, I'm putting the style tag in there, green for every single anchor link. And if I want to change that, or I want to look at it, it's going to be really cluttered, a lot of stuff in there. So do you guys see how an external style sheet, you change it once, and all anchor links get that change? You guys see how that can be a good thing over inline? Okay, one file that does everything rather than every single anchor link I need to change. Another good benefit is if, let's say, your students.html, you link up this style sheet right here, it also will look at this external style sheet and change its anchor links. So with inline, you have to change every single anchor link on every single page of your entire website. With embedded, you have to change every single embedded section or head section, not every single tag, but every single page of your entire web page. With external, you have to change only one file, and it changes all of your files. And with browser defaults, you just don't do anything, and it just changes them in blue anyways. Okay? So do you guys see the cascading effect, why they're called cascading style sheets? All right, that's where that name comes from. Now there's one more called imported. It's lame. Nobody uses it. At imported URL, and in brackets you give a location. You know, maybe you want to say http://google.com/style.css, and it will literally grab that style sheet from another location and suck it and place it right there. But yours would override that, huh?
Isn't that plagiarism?
Well, I mean, you might own the website, so I mean, in this case, yes. But I mean, there's instances where you need to import in some other, CSS. Again, most websites almost completely ignore imported and don't even recognize that it's there. But there is another type of CSS that you're doing there. So those are the various types of CSS. We're going to take those out. We're going to suck out the embedded because I don't like that. And I'm going to pull out the inline because I don't like that either. And we'll just leave moving forward with external CSS, and that's the norm that I want everybody in here knowing how to do. All right? All right, let's keep pushing on down through this content here. So there are different types of selectors that exist out there, okay? And we're going to show you what they are. This is what we call an HTML element name selector or a tag selector. And those are just recognized by looking at these and matching them. So I could make my header and give it some style. I could give its child, the H1, some style. I could give my navigation some style. So I could go over in here and I could say my navigation is going to have a background dash color aqua or something. You know what? I'd probably give it, let me give it that blue up here. And you can see how that whole bar and each individual list item in this case got that style. I could go as far as my list items are going to be given a background color or something. I'm going to go and just grab whatever that is and use that weird red. And you can see how all of my list items have that. So can you guys kind of see where parents come into play and children come into play and that relationship? And you kind of stack, again, that cascading effect. I applied it to the parent navigation and then some to the children list items in there. And you can see that kind of happening over here on the side. So there are, let's say down below, I did another list item, okay? I'm going to do a UL, and in here I'm going to just do a bunch of list items, okay? Like so. And I'm going to refresh that. And both of those list items are getting that red. And some of you guys might say, how do I go about affecting a specific item or specific items? And the first way we can do is through what's called the descendant selector. Okay? And a descendant selector allows you to identify parents and grandparents. So in this case, I'm going to say nav space list item. And what that's going to do is it's going to look for all the list items that are inside of a navigation or are children or grandchildren or whatever inside of a nav. And so when I refresh that, you can see how it's just affecting this one and not this one, because this one is inside of a nav while this one is not inside of a nav. Therefore, the descendant selector does not apply to the second list item set. Do you guys understand that? Descendant selectors are very important. You're going to use these a lot because when you get into a website that's has a lot of different things on it, you're going to want to affect different elements and say, I want a table that's inside of this element that's inside of that element and not some tables or something over here on the side. And so descendant selectors allow you to dig down through that. So I could go as far as I want to look inside of my navigation, look at their unordered lists, and affect their list items. And in this case, I even have an anchor link inside of there. So I might say, and my anchor links I want to change. So any anchor link inside of a list item, inside of a UL, inside of navigation will get that color. And these anchor links are just going to be any other anchor link. So it's going to first make all my anchor links green. It's going to go down to this one, say, only make anchor links that are inside of list items that color. So let's go back and look at Llama World quick. I'll refresh that. You can see that these anchor links are red, while email me down below here is not red. And again, we're accomplishing that through a descendant selector. All right? There are some other ways of doing this. The descendant selector can be a little tricky, knowing the child-parent relationship as you go through. There's another one called a class, all right? And I'm going to wipe those out really quick, and I'm going to kill these. And let's say that, for example, you want to affect just the adopt or the sponsor a llama link. Okay, it's your call to action. It's important to you, and you want that one to be a background color for some reason. Okay. And the way we can do that is what we call a class. Now I'm gonna write out some comments here. You can use a /* and a / to denote comments within CSS. And then you saw how I did it inside of HTML with the the greater than, less than, exclamation mark, 2 dashes, and then comments or something, -- like that. And that's how you would add comments inside of your HTML if you want those right there. Okay, so those are the two ways to comment out your code. I'm going to go and I'm going to add classes to this one right here. And the way we denote what's called a class is a dot. And let's just say I make a class called red. And you can name it whatever you want. Just don't name it like an anchor link or a body or something like that, because those are elements we don't want to confuse with. So I'm just going to say this is going to be red, and I'm going to say its color is going to be red, like so. All right. Then if I have a specific element I want to apply that to, I can come over to my anchor link, for example, home, and I can say class equals red. And what that's going to do is it's going to apply that red. You know, it's matching up that name right there with that one right there. So class equals red. And we'll refresh that, and you can see how home has now been made red. Okay, so with classes, you can go through and say, all right, class equals red, and we can take that and we can apply it to our H1 up above, and we could apply it to this bold down there. And as I refresh that, you can see all of those are getting that red. Classes are used when you want to use an item multiple times. Okay, you want to make various elements on your page red, for example. Okay, rather than, you know, all of your list items or all of your H1s or something like that. You can use a class in order to do that. Any questions on that one? Yeah.
So you can do descendant selectors on classes? as
Sure
well?
can. So you could say something like this. You could say, look inside my navigation, and if I have any reds in there, then color them red. Anything else, don't. So I can say over here, my bold, I'm going to add the class red to. And then I'm going to have this navigation red class right there. Save that. And you can see how this bold is no longer red. And that one's not getting it either. Why is that one not? Oh, I need to say anchor link red. That's why. Okay, so I'm looking inside my navigation at my anchor links that have the class red applied to them. And now that's red.
So wait, why did you?
Because I wasn't specifying an anchor link. And because my anchor link up above here was changing that color, it didn't get that style applied to it. So this one
But
does.
it was still under nav.
It was under nav, but this one was specific to that anchor link, and this one was not. It's
So
okay.
even though I had red and HTML
Mhm.
class call, the anchor link still had priority over it?
I'm pretty sure. You know, it might have not refreshed. That's the problem, because if I go back here and I say nav.red, it's getting it.
Yeah.
But I like to go a step further and say specifically affect those anchor links. Because if I didn't have that, okay, if I take that off, say red here, and I just make this some garbage there, and I refresh this now, okay, that is being made red. And it's being made red because I'm applying it to the anchor link. But I was worried that, so I forgot about that, but I was worried that if you don't, it's going to kick back and be blue. Or in this case, red or purple because it's visited. But that should be good.
Where's the visited color?
We're going to get into that, but essentially what you do is you do an anchor link and you say visited, and then you override the color.
So it has like a default for visited?
Yeah,
That purple
yeah.
that we-
Yeah, an unvisited is blue, visited is purple.
that's just
There's like a focus and an active and some different ones out there, but visited is purple.
the browser default.
Yep. And I like to just make that blue or whatever color my other links are as well. But a class just looks like that. Red, color, say red. Okay? And that's how you apply it. The next one we have is what's called a ID. And an ID equals, let's say ID equals blue. Or, you know, let's not apply it there. Let's apply it to our, and we're going to, our H1, we're going to say logo. All right? And an ID starts off with a hashtag, logo. And in this case, we'll just say font size is going to be 2 rem, and actually it already is 2 rem, I believe. 3 rem. And you can see how I've made Llama World much larger. Okay, now you're going to see some similarities. ID equals logo and then hashtag logo, or class equals red and then dot red. And I mean, essentially they're kind of the same thing, right? Just one's a period, one's a hashtag, one says class and one says ID. The best way to think about this is classes used multiple times in a page, okay? Where I can take red and I can make red down here and I can put red up here, and IDs used only once in a page. All right, so that means I can use logo here, but I cannot put logo down in this area or logo down in here, or it doesn't validate. And the reasoning is later on when we get in some JavaScript and we have to reference out some unique instances or places on the page, you need a unique identifier to call those out. If we want to use what are called fragmented link identifiers, you need IDs, a unique place to do that. And if you have multiple IDs, it doesn't know which one to select. So for right now, just know that if you're going to use something like red, and you're going to use it a bunch of times on the page, make it a class. If you're going to have like a logo area, and you know that you only have one logo, and you're not going to use this again, then you can make it an ID. Sometimes, you know, a student will have an ID, right? That is unique to them, but a class like we have right now, there's many students in it, right? So you can kind of use that to kind of help you guys think about, you know, IDs are only used once, classes are used multiple times. That's a rule of thumb. If you do not do that, you will not validate your code. And we've talked about validation, and I'll dock, you know, pretty heavy if you don't validate all of your pages before. So as we get into this a little further, it's going to be a little bit harder to validate, and that's one of them. So if I go in here and I add another logo down to this LI right here, and I grab my page, and I look up my validator, and I go validate that, it's not going to validate because I have multiple IDs. And you can see duplicate ID, logo, and then down below here, first occurrence of ID was here. If I take that out now and refresh it and recall that, then I have no validation issues. So, yeah.
So they're the same thing, it's just organization.
Yeah.
And it's
So there's a lot of arguments online if you should just always just use classes for everything. And I can see that, but there are some good reasons to use IDs, and that's primarily for, you know, layout items and referencing out specific locations on your page. Okay, IDs once, classes multiple times. All right, so the 4 selectors we have now are just a normal HTML element. We have a descendant selector. We can mix and match those. We may add a class in here, something like that. That's a descendant selector class. And then we can also just use IDs, something like that. You can name them whatever you want. You just have to make sure that you match those up when you're saying class equals something or ID equals something. Yes, sir?
I was going to ask if there's nothing wrong with using classes for everything, like you chose to use classes for everything.
What's that? Say that
If
again?
you want to use a class instead of an ID, like for everything.
So the
Like,
homework's
show
going to be
class.
very specific on whether to use an ID or a class, and follow that, because later on we're going to have some elements to say call out the ID to do this, da 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 da, and if you decide to branch out and do your own, it's not going to work. You're going to have to go back and fix it and fix stuff. And also in your homework, you guys are going to notice that some things may not work, and it's probably because you missed something simple in the homework previous, and there's a good chance, well, I bet you at least half of you guys are going to have to go back and fix little things from time to time that I may have missed during grading. You know, just small little, maybe it's like a dot instead of a hashtag or something really small or simple like that, and it's not going to work anymore. So make sure you check those out. There's your classes, there's your IDs, and those are pretty cool. You use them a lot, all the time. Get really comfortable with those all the time, all over the place. I was looking, well, I was going to show you examples, but it's fine. Let's use, no, we talked about the div, didn't we? Didn't we talk about the div tag before? Thought we had. All right, so let's go back to that. So again, the div tag is just a tag that's going to break out some content by itself. Let's add class to this, and we're just going to call it background. Oh, yeah, that's fine. And I'll add a class here called background, and we'll do a background-color. We'll make it aqua. In a div, you can see it's going to span the whole screen and kind of fill some areas. And earlier, we learned that footers are the exact same thing as divs, and mains are the exact same thing as divs. Navs are the same as divs, and headers are the same as divs, other than that there's semantic markup, and they describe the data within. Okay, they're going to describe our header element, our navigation elements, our main content, our footer content, and so forth. And that's really important to know about. Yeah?
Why would you want to define that as a class? Wouldn't you just want to put it as like, you got it under main, so would you just, yeah, div, so wouldn't you just put div, and then the background color is aqua, rather than putting it inside your HTML?
No. So you don't want to do that.
No, I'm saying like over in your CS.
Okay, because that will affect all divs. So if I say div, something like that, all divs on my website are going to get that. And you will literally have hundreds of divs. Okay, divs are what control all of the layout for your page. It's like basically saying change my main, change my footer, because those are all similar things, but you're going to have literally hundreds of divs. Right? If I go, I pull up, the homework, for example, here, and I do a quick search down through their source, and I just quickly look for div, you can see that this page has over 1,600 divs in it. So rather than applying it to like a global div, you see how we could run into problems? So giving it something like background is very specific, because then I can come over here and say apply that specifically to that div and not to all the other divs. That make sense to you? Okay. But again, get comfortable with divs. Going to be all over the place. And header and main and all those just act just like them. They work exactly the same. All right, back to Llama World. There's another tag that's similar to a div, and we call it span. And span, let me take these out really quick here. Okay, and span, the way that works is just like a div, but you're going to hug specific words. Okay, so we're going to say span, and then we'll just grab those words right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply the class background to it, so you guys can see that. And you can see that these words have background. So span and div are a little different. Span is what we call inline, and this is very important to understand right now, okay? Span will allow the next item to go next to it. If I change that to a div, and I refresh that, then it forces it down a line underneath. So div divides it out, and span allows it to go inline. So if I had to throw down a class like bold, something like that, Mallory, would that be an inline element, or would that be a block element? Would that be like a div, or would that be like a span? And a bold. Well, how could we figure that out? Tell me the difference again between divs and spans. What's the difference? Do you remember? So again, divs will break down a line and spans will go inline, okay? That's what we call block on top of one another stacking, and inline go next to one another, okay? Now if I look at that bold, Mallory, all right, and it's showing right here, is that going below the item underneath it, or is that going next to the items? The one that I've highlighted right here. So is it going underneath or next to? Next to. So therefore it's what? Is it an inline or a block? It's an inline. Okay, do you guys get that? All right, let's do another one. Let's do a main tag. Michaeline, right? No. No. You got Michaela, right? And totally for blanking on you. The first M&M. Miley, and that's where I'm going. Miley. So is main a block or an inline? And why? Why would you think it's a block? So if I apply, let me take this div off here. If I go to this main and I say class equals background, and we refresh it, it's encompassing everything, and copyright's not next to it, so therefore it's a block. But you can see because it's stacking below one another. So main is a block element, right? How about paragraph? What do you think paragraph is? Anybody want to take a guess at that one?
Span.
It is not a span. And the way we know that, if it was a span, this word right here would start right over here on the side. Okay, and it would continue next to, in that flow, in line of one another. But because it goes down a line, that stacking happens, we know it doesn't. How about these list items? Dallin, what do you think? Are they inline or are they block?
I believe they're block.
How come?
Because they're not inline text with anything else. When you make a list, it kind of gives it its own line.
Yeah, so they go down below one another. And if I was to apply one of those list items, that background, so class equals background, you can kind of see how that element goes all the way across the screen and shoves the next one underneath it. This is very important to understand early on, because when you guys are talking layout and you want things going next to other items or below other items and shifting around the page, you're going to have to know the difference between inline and block. And the most basic empty structure you can give, one is a div. It just throws it underneath in block format, no other styling, or span, which puts it next to it and no styling applied to it. So if I take off that background color and I refresh this span right here, you would never know that that is a span if I hadn't have put that background color to it. Garrett?
So are we going to talk about floats now?
Oh, not right now, but we're going to get to floats in a few weeks. Did you have a question? Okay. All right. Last element I want to show you guys before we move on. Those spans is CSS validation. So we have HTML validators, and we can look that one up, and we also have CSS validators, and we can pull that one up. And when you validate your page, you need to be putting in the location, of every page on your website. So I would do, index.html, I'm going to do students.html, I'm going to do faculty.html, however you spell that, there we go. Faculty, and so forth, okay? Every page must be validated. With CSS, really you can just dump in the one page, and because you're using external, it's going to go look at it and tell you that it passed, okay? You don't have to do every single page on CSS because all of your pages are going to point back using that little line of code to your CSS, and then it's going to look at this file and make sure it's valid at that point. Okay? Every time I grade, all right, from last assignment and on for the rest of the class, and any future web class you'll have from me, I check validation first. Okay? Don't turn it in to me unless it can validate. It's just clean code. And if you do turn it to me and it doesn't validate, I'm going to immediately pull 20% off your grade. Okay, so that's 20% that you know you can save. And if it's really horrible validation and you blatantly have no idea what's going on, it's going to be a lot less than that. All right, so I mean, I had a lot of people in the assignment before that were taking their headers and placing them up in this area, up in here for whatever reason, and that's not going to validate. I had a lot of HTML. Maybe I had like anchor links, up inside of my head tags up here, or a lot of people who put like specific H1 tags and they would write stuff up there. And to be honest with you, a browser can still handle that. It will still show up and look maybe the way that you thought it's supposed to look. But it doesn't mean that it's valid code. I mean, I can go back to these and paste that in there and check that and I get validation issues right back, okay? So make sure that you guys are validating and often validate your stuff after every save. Do some changes. If you question them, go back and validate, and it'll tell you if it's broken or not. If something's not working, go validate. It's probably going to tell you where your error is. And you just kind of, and this one says look on line 9, column 5, and there's a stray head tag, and then down below here it says the body tag is seen, but an element has the same type. So little problems here and there that can help you troubleshoot your code. Your assignment is going to have you guys go. Let's go pull it up quick, talk about it. It's going to have you create a page like that, all right? And you got background colors. I want you to notice that there's no space in between these two bars. Okay, so when it tells you to put some CSS into a certain class and there's still space there, you probably haven't done it correctly. It must look identical to these examples. If you don't, you're going to get dock points. All right, it's very explicit and specific on adding certain colors to certain elements and certain classes and IDs and things like that. And so you're going to have to figure out what those are and get those changed. But to be honest with you guys, it starts getting cool from here and moving on through the class, because now you got to start using some code to make stuff actually look good and look legit. And then after you have this awesome looking website, for the most part, you guys are set free on your own, and you guys go create whatever you want for your final project. So if you guys have any other questions, we're going to end the video right here. Anything else?